boys and girls, welcome back to me, Henry, and Nipper. Now we're going to continue part 2 of the story of the prince with the big nose. So, if you remember, had it not been for one clever person struck out of a bright idea, he said that he thought it was indispensably necessary for a man to have a great nose, and a woman was so different, and that a learned man had discovered in a very old manuscript that the celebrated Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, the beauty of the ancient world, had a turned-up nose. At this information, Prince Wish was so delighted that he made the courtier a very handsome present and immediately set off ambassadors to demand Princess Darling in marriage. She accepted his offer at once and returned with the ambassadors. He made all haste to meet and welcome her. But she was only 3 leagues distant from the capital before he had time to even kiss her hand. The magician, who had once assumed the shape of his mother's cat, Minion, appeared in the air and carried her off before the lover's very eyes. Prince Wish was almost beside himself with grief, declared that nothing should induce him to return his throne and kingdom till he had found Darling. He would suffer none of his courtiers or attendants to follow him, but forbidding them all adieu, mounted a good horse, laid the reins on the animal's neck, and let him take him wherever he would go. The horse entered a wide extended plain and trotted on steadily the whole day without finding a single house. Master and beast began almost faint with hunger and thirst. The Prince Wish might have wished himself safe at home again, had he not discovered just at dusk a cavern, where there sat beside a bright lantern a little woman who might have been more than 100 years old. Oh dear me, that's some age. She put on her spectacles, the better to look at the stranger, and he noticed that her nose was so small that the spectacles would hardly stay on. Then the prince and the fairy, for it was a fairy, burst in mutual fit of laughter. "What a funny nose!" cried one. "Not so funny as yours, madam," returned the other. "But pray let us leave our noses alone, and be good enough to give something to eat, for I am dying of hunger, and so's my poor horse." "With all my heart," answered the fairy. "Although your nose is ridiculously long, you are no less the son of one of my best friends. I love your father like a brother. He had a very handsome nose." "What is wanting to my nose?" asked the Wish rather savagely. "Oh, nothing really at all. On the contrary, there's a great deal too much of it. But never mind. One may be very, very honest man and yet have too big a nose. As I said, it was a great friend of your father's. He came often to see me. I was very pretty then, and often at times he used to say to me, 'My sister.' I will hear the rest, madam, with pleasure, when I have supped. But will you please condescend to remember that I have had tasted nothing all day?" "Poor boy," said the fairy, "I will give you some supper directly, and while you eat, I will tell you my history in 6 words, for I hate much talking. A long tongue is as insupportable as a long nose, and I remember when I was young, however, how much I used to be admired because I was not a talker. Indeed, someone said to the queen of my mother, 'For poor as you see me now, I am the daughter of a great king who always ate when he was hungry.'" "I hope," interrupted the prince, whose patience was fast departing. "You are right," said the imperturbable old fairy, "and I will bring you your supper directly. Only I wish first just to say that the king, my father—" "Hang the king, your father," Prince Wish was about to exclaim, but he stopped himself and only observed that however the pleasure of his conversation might make him forget his hunger, it could not have the same effect upon his horse, who was really starving. The fairy, pleased at his civility, called her servants, and bade them supply him at once with all they need. And he added, "I must say you are very polite and very good-tempered, in spite of your nose." "What had the old woman to do with my nose?" thought the prince. "If I was not so very hungry, I would soon show her what she is, a regular old gossip and a chatterbox. She's to fancy she talks little indeed. One must be very foolish not to know one's own defects. This comes of being born a princess. Flatterers have spoilt her and persuaded her that she talks little indeed. I never knew of anybody who chatted so much." While the prince thus was meditating, the servants were laying the table. The fairy asked them 100 unnecessary questions, simply for the pleasure of hearing herself talk. "Well," thought the wish, "I am delighted that I came hither, if only to learn how wise I have been in never listening to the flatterers, who hide us from all our faults, or make us believe they are perfectionists, but they could never deceive me. I know of all my own weak points, I trust, as truly he did believe himself." So he went on eating contentedly, nor stopped till the fairy began to address him. "Prince," she said, "will you kindly enough to turn a little? Your nose casts such a shadow that I cannot see what is on my plate. And as I was saying, your father admired me and always made me welcome at court. What is the court etiquette there now? Do the ladies still go to the assemblies, promenades and balls? I beg your pardon for laughing, but how very long your nose is." "I wish you would cease to speak of my nose," said the prince, becoming very annoyed. "It is what it is, and I do not desire it any shorter." "Oh, I see that I have vexed you," returned the fairy. "Nevertheless, I am one of your best friends, and so I shall take the liberty of always." She was doubtless have gone on talking till midnight, but the prince, unable to bear it any longer, interrupted her, thanked her for her hospitality, bade her a hasty adieu, and rode away. Oh, he travelled for a long time, half the world, but he never heard no news of Princess Darling. However, in each place he went, he heard one remarkable fact, that the great length of his nose. The little boys in the street jeered at him, the peasants stared at him, and the more polite ladies and gentlemen whom he met in society used to try in vain to keep from laughing, and to get out of his way as soon as they could. So the poor little prince became very gradually quite forlorn and solitary. He thought that the world was mad, but still he never thought of there being anything queer about his nose. At last the old fairy, who she was a chatterbox, was very good-natured, so that he was almost breaking his heart. She felt so sorry for him and wished to help him in spite of himself, for she knew the enchantment which hid from the Princess Darling. She could never be broken till he had discovered his own defect. So she went in search of the princess, and being more powerful than the magician, since she was a good fairy and he was an evil magician, she got away from him and shut her up in a palace of crystal, where she placed on the road which Prince Wish had passed. He was riding along very melancholy when he saw the palace, and its entrance was a room made of purest glass, in which sat his beloved princess, smiling and beautiful as ever. He leapt from his horse and ran towards her. She held out her hand for him to kiss, but he could not get at it for the glass. He transported with eagerness and delight. He dashed his sword through the crystal and succeeded in breaking a small opening, in which he put her beautiful rosy mouth. But it was in vain. Prince Wish could not approach it. He twisted his neck about and turned his head on all sides, till at length, putting up his hand to his face, he discovered the impediment. It must be confessed, he exclaimed, that it's my nose, it's too long. That moment the glass walls all splintered and crashed asunder, and the old fairy appeared leading Princess Darling. "Allow, Prince," she said, "that you are very much obliged to me, for now the enchantment is ended. You may marry the object of your choice." But added she, smiling, "I fear I might have to talk to you forever on the subject of your nose, and you would not believe me about its length till I became an obstacle to your inclinations. Now behold it." And she held up a crystal mirror. "Are you satisfied to be no different from other people?" "Perfectly," said the Prince Wish. He found his nose had shrank to an ordinary length, and taking the Princess Darling by the hand, he kissed her courteously and affectionately and satisfactorily. Then they departed to their own country and lived happily ever after. Well, children, wasn't that a lovely story? So, nighty-night, children. Nighty-night, children. Nighty-night.